Hey guys, so this is Miss Wills. This is probably the first time that you have done guided notes with me that typically we would do out of a textbook. So, anyways, with that said, normally your teacher would give you a textbook and you would be going through the pages and finding the answers for these guided notes on your own. But since this is your first time doing this, I'm going to actually do these guided notes with you. So I will probably be talking to you a little bit as well as we go through here, telling you some things that aren't on your guided notes. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and get started. So you should have received a paper from me that looks like this, that says Chapter 5, Lesson 1, Geography of the Fertile Crescent, Ancient Mesopotamia. We're going to do this together. So I'm going to slide this paper down here and I'm going to enlarge this and we're going to do a section at a time. So what you're going to need to do, as I type in the answer, you're going to need to write in the answer. And then when we get finished, we have the whole thing done. And then you can show it to me for a grade. All right, here we go. Okay, here we go. So the first thing you need to do is put your name on here. And if you don't mind, put your class right here underneath it so that I'll know what class you're in. Alright, now remember, as I type the answers and I go over this with you, I'm going to read each one of these, and as I type, you write the answers. Alright, here we go. So the Fertile Crescent, which you have already done your map, so you should be familiar with what I'm talking about when I talk about the Fertile Crescent. We're talking about the area of Mesopotamia, covers the present-day countries of, whoops, let me move this up a little bit, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and one more, and that is Israel. Now we're going to take it a section at a time, so we're going to do the first 3 questions and then I'll move this box and move this paper and you'll see the next few. Alright, much of the land was either rocky, mountains, capitalize it again, mountains, or desert. But parts of the Fertile Crescent were lush and green. Ooh, that took off. Alright, so much of the land was either rocky mountains or desert, but parts of the Fertile Crescent were lush and green. It was called the Fertile Crescent because in between the 2 rivers there was nice, good, rich soil or silt in which they could grow their crops. So there were 2 rivers, and you should know this from your map that you did. There were 2 rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, that made life in these areas possible. So we should have questions 1, 2, and 3 now completed. So now we're going to move down into question 4, which is the section that says between 2 rivers. Alright, here we go. The region between the Tigris and the Euphrates is known as Mesopotamia. In Greek, this word means land between 2 rivers and is now known as the country of Iraq. See what I did there? Had that typed before you even knew it. Alright, now we're going to move down to from mountains to sea. Alright, so the 2 rivers are the Tigris and Euphrates, and the region between it is known as Mesopotamia. In Greek, that word means land between 2 rivers. It is now the country of Iraq. Alright, now we're going to move this, hopefully, here we go. And we're going to do questions 6 through 9 from mountains to sea. All right, here we go. The rivers begin in the snow-capped Taurus Mountains of what is today called Turkey. The rivers first reach the plateau. Whoops, didn't type. Let's try that again. All right, the plateau of Iraq, and continue to flow to, we could put the, or, well, we're not going to. Continue to flow to lower land. The rivers then make their way to the Persian Gulf, where it dumps into the Persian Gulf. It empties there. Okay, so when you're talking about a river, when you are looking at where the river begins, you call that the source. When you're looking at where the river ends and what body of water it dumps into, you call that the mouth. So the mouth of the river would be the Persian Gulf. That's where that's where the two rivers empty into. They kind of like go out into the Persian Gulf. All right. Now you're supposed to look at a map on page 105 and see which intermediate directions the rivers I can't talk. In what intermediate direction do the two rivers flow? Well, if you remember your compass rose, you have cardinal directions and intermediate directions. Cardinal directions are north, south, east, and west. If you look back at your map that you did the other day, you will find that this is talking about cardinal, north, south, east, west. Intermediate are those directions in between. So this would be northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest. So we know the rivers flow this direction into the Persian Gulf because this is the Persian Gulf. So if you're looking at that, do you have a guess as to which intermediate direction the river flows? Hopefully you said that the river flows southeast, because it does. All right, so now we have questions 1 through 9 completed, and we're going to move on to the section called floods, and it starts question number 10. All right, we're ready for number 10 now. So I think this might be a little bit smoother this time writing the answers in, but I'm going to go a little bit quicker too, so be ready. All right, you haven't studied Egypt yet, but you will soon. So question 10 says, as in Egypt, people in Mesopotamia depended on river deposits of something from floods. Well, the something that they're talking about is good, rich dirt. That's what made the Fertile Crescent so fertile. That's what it made it good for plants to grow in. However, we aren't going to write dirt in here because they called this something else. They called it silt. So they depended on river deposits of silt from floods, which actually is very fine particles of dirt. It carries lots of rich minerals with it, so that's what grows food well. Now, it says, number 11 says, write the sentence that tells how floods in Mesopotamia were different from the ones in Egypt. In Egypt, they were able to predict when the flooding season would be. But in Mesopotamia, the floods in Mesopotamia did not come as regularly as those in Egypt. So in Egypt, it was a regular occurrence when the floods were going to happen. But in Mesopotamia, that wasn't the case. It's kind of like here. Sometimes we think we can predict when it's going to rain. Sometimes our rainy season is in the spring. Sometimes we don't know. Like yesterday, it looked really, really stormy out. And then today, it's not stormy. Yesterday, some places in our county got rain and some places did not. So the floods in Mesopotamia did not come as regularly as those in Egypt. So therefore, if they're depending on the river deposits of silt from the flooding, then in Egypt that was more dependable, but in Mesopotamia not so much. Alright, since southern Mesopotamia did not get much rain each year, alright, southern Mesopotamia did not get much rain each year, so droughts were a constant threat to farmers and their crops. Okay? So a drought is when you go for a very long period of time with no rain and all your vegetation dies. We've had droughts here before. Farmers have had to buy their hay from other farmers that were in the north or the west of the country, and because we didn't have enough rain for farmers to be able to cut hay. Gardens died, so we've had droughts here before. So southern Mesopotamia was known for that. Now, in your textbook, there's a paragraph that talks about southern Mesopotamia versus northern Mesopotamia, and the question wants to know which part of Mesopotamia had better farmland. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to do with whether or not they got a lot of rain. This had to do with which area, either the north or the southern part of Mesopotamia, which one had better farmland, which had richer soil. So if we're looking at these maps and we're talking about northern Mesopotamia and southern Mesopotamia, it wants to know which one of these areas was better farmland. The answer is southern. Now, you don't have your textbook. This right here, when you see a question that says map work, you would look for a map that was probably around this page right here, 105, and there would be questions near that map, and you would actually read those questions and then answer on that paper. But since you're not using your textbook, we're going to go ahead and X these two out. Alright, we're going to move on down from river to field. So, hang on. Alright, and we're going to do question number 14, and then we're going to finish up 15 through 20. So I'll have to move the paper, but here we go. So from river to field, to solve the problem of either having not enough or too much water for farming, farmers learned to build water control and irrigation systems. Now we use water controlled and irrigation systems here all the time. Farmers use it. We're going to take a look in class at some irrigation systems that they used in ancient Mesopotamia, but people use water control systems all the time now. We still have canals, we still have dams, we still have pipes that take water from one area to another. You probably outside your house have a spigot where you turn on the water and hook a water hose to it, and you can water your plants or your yard or whatever you need to. We have sinks in the school, and it's a way to control water. If the faucets didn't have handles, you wouldn't be able to turn the water off, and it would either run all the time, or we would have to turn the water completely off, and then we wouldn't have any rain in the school. So ancient Mesopotamia used some different types of water irrigation systems, and we're actually going to take a look at some of those later. Alright, now we are ready for question number 15. Okay, here we go. Question 15. Farming in ancient Mesopotamia. There are 10 main kinds of crops and trees that they grew in Mesopotamia. Now they probably grow a lot more, but in ancient Mesopotamia they grew wheat, they grew barley, beans, cucumbers, onions, lettuce. Are you keeping up? I want to be able to read it. Spice plants, date palms. They grew apple trees and pomegranate trees. Okay? Some of those things you may have eaten, some of them you may be wondering about. Like, what's a spice plant? What's a date palm? What's a pomegranate? Some people may know because you've eaten that before. Some people, they may be something that you try one day. Some of you may like cucumbers, some of you may not. Some of you may like onions, some of you may not. Wheat and barley, those are used in breads. I think you know what beans are. So these are some of the crops and some of the trees that were growing in ancient Mesopotamia. Now, because these crops needed water, farmers would often plant them along canal banks. And canal banks were really close to the water, to a water source. So that way, it would be easy to either A, use an irrigation system to water the crops, or B, the roots would grow down near the canal system if it was a tree and be able to get their water from the canal. All right, question 17. Shepherds cared for their sheep and their goats because they're in the middle of an area that's not fenced in. They don't have their wildlife, or they don't have their livestock fenced in. And wildlife is prone to try to kill, especially sheep and goats, because they're smaller. So they had to protect them from wild animals such as lions and jackals. If you do not know what a jackal is a wild dog, and they are very vicious. Now, the sheep that the farmers raised, they were prized for, can you guess? Well, wool is one. I shouldn't have put wools, I should have put wool. And the other one was for their milk. We don't think about drinking sheep milk, but they did. So they were prized for their milk and their wool, or their wool and their milk, whichever way you want to write. Their cattle were really good work animals. Okay? And they used them for things such as milk. They also used them if they were going to eat them. They used them for meat. And then when they didn't want to lose any of the good parts of the cow if it was dead, so they would actually use their hide to make leather, which we still do today. Now, Mesopotamia was not a real inviting place to live because it was so hot. It did have really good fertile soil, but it was so hot. But because of the location where it was between the two rivers and the good fertile soil and the ability to grow crops and grow them abundantly to have a surplus of food, it was one of the world's earliest civilizations that developed there. Okay, so that gets that done. You should have all of your answers now for 20. Whoops, didn't mean to move that. Didn't mean to move that either. There we go. So now if you have finished questions 1 through 20 with me in this video, if you will show me this paper, then I will give you a check mark in my book and you might even get a ticket. Who knows? All right, see you, bye.